Yeah.
So is build to rent actually going to solve anything?
No, because big companies are here to make profits, not to supply housing for the people who really need it. Why would they, when they can supply housing to people who've got loads of money?
Yeah, they've got their clients that they have to satisfy. They've got
their shareholders
proper
to satisfy,
financial strategy.
Yeah.
You know, they've got real financial planning that is not, let's go in and try and help this town. That's absolutely not the goal.
I've heard from clients recently where they haven't done referencing correctly, and those tenants have turned out to be an absolute nightmare. And if they had done the referencing from the start properly and used the tools that are out there to use, they potentially wouldn't have had these issues.
Right, ladies and gents, welcome to the Investors Corner. If you're watching, it's this one right here. We've got a pillow just for it. This week, Andy Brown, Mike Robson.
Hello.
Lettings and property management extraordinaires are joining me on the podcast to share some great advice for landlords. We're going to give our top tips, do's and don'ts, I like to call them, do's and don'ts. Not number two's do's, just tips for doing. So I've got a couple written down. Andy's got a couple written down. Mike keeps it up here.
Not a problem.
18, 20 years in the game, and he just keeps them up in the dome, as we like to say. So should we start with a don't? Who's got a don't? Don't do this. If you're a landlord, if you're a property investor, what would be your number one don't? I'll go to you first, Mike, because they're all stored up here.
Oh,
that means that if Andy uses the one you were going to say,
it's very negative, isn't it? Don't do this.
Don't do this. But
as a landlord,
bad news sells, as they say. So let's kick off the podcast there.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't advertise my property having not spent any time or money on it. And what I mean by that is I've seen a few recently where they just advertise substandard. And I think what that does is attract bad quality tenants and get you below market level rent. So it's quite simple, is set yourself a little bit of a budget and wait before you advertise it, and just get a day or 2 days working, get it cleaned, get it right. Either get all of the furniture in or get all of the furniture out, so it's ready and it's presentable for people, so you can get the photos right, the video right, and show people that you actually give a one tea about the house. Because if you give a then your tenants will as well. My
pet hate for that, and I don't know whether it's the letting agent or the landlord that's guilty of it, potentially it's a combination of both, but it's probably 80% the letting agent, is when a property comes on the market, the landlord's done it all out, the photos look lovely, no tenants moved in, it's sometimes the landlord's furniture from where they were living there, or it's just totally empty. It then gets let for 4 years, and then they put it back live with the photos of 4 years ago, and it's been not trashed, but it's 4 years
totally
older.
Different house,
And I just feel that that's a bit it's a bit of a misdescription, isn't it, of 100%. The property. That's my little pet hate. So don't do that.
A lot of people either travel a long way or they'll ask to offer on the property without seeing it. Yeah. And the photos can be 6, 7, 8. Do you know what? I've seen photos that I am sure I took over 15 years ago, popped back on Rightmove in the last few months. Just recognised them because they're now the wrong aspect and they're quite blurry because they were taken on a camera in about 2010.
Do you think that's laziness from an agent though, using the previous photos?
Yes.
Or that could be they can't get access to the property, tenants being difficult potentially.
Well, if they can't get access to the property to take photos, they're going to struggle to get access to the property to do viewings.
Yeah.
So different issue really, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it is generally laziness, or they're thinking these photos make the house look better than they are now. But as you say, it's just a misdescription of the property.
Yeah, because you're not letting the property because it's got nice photos for you to show your friends on your phone. You're letting it to live in, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you want to see it in its true glory. Exactly that. What about you, Andy? Any little pet hates? Any don'ts?
My biggest one that I've heard from clients recently, and my advice would be don't scrimp on referencing. Actually get referencing done properly. And the majority of the people that I'm talking about is landlords that want to do it themselves and don't use the proper tools to get the referencing done. We've got a lot of stuff on referencing at the moment where you can use open banking now, you can use verification methods for employers, you can check landlords out and owners of properties that have provided that reference to make sure that they are the landlord of that property. So there's certain tools that need to be used in order to ensure that you're getting the best and truthful tenants into your property. I've heard from clients recently where they haven't done referencing correctly, and those tenants have turned out to be an absolute nightmare. And if they had done the referencing from the start properly and used the tools that are out there to use, they potentially wouldn't have had these issues, with CCJs popping up at different addresses and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, don't skip that. And even if you're getting rent paid up front for the full term or 6 months rent in advance, don't just accept that without doing any referencing at all. Still do the referencing, because when it gets to the end of that 6 months point and rent's due again, or it gets to the end of the term and the rent's due up front again, what's to say that those tenants are going to continue to pay the rent? Yeah, you could serve notice on them if they don't pay the rent. They're not going anywhere. They'll stay on at the property, and then you'll need to go legal on them. So yeah, referencing, make sure you get it done.
Oh, you made my blood boil then. after I WhatsApped you guys about my own situation with one of my buy-to-lets, this week. It's probably not come from referencing, but that is a prime example of, where a tenant situation there is a tenant crisis at the moment, isn't there? There is an issue for people, and I think one of the things that was in the manifesto recently was about how long tenants have going to be given notice, or maybe making it 4 months, I think was discussed, wasn't it? And I probably think, it's probably fair, because 2 months have flown by with my tenant. They haven't found anywhere. They're meant to move out in 12 days' time. And he rang me yesterday, like I said to you guys, and he's been struggling. He's been offering on 3 properties a week, needs to stay in a certain borough, can't find a property, can't get accepted on a property. So he's called the council. It's him and his young daughter and his wife. And the council have basically advised him to let me take him to court to then go through that route. And once the court has issued formal notice on him to leave, then they can give him a council property for him to move into, which is obviously going to cost me thousands of pounds and potentially another 3-4 months to do it, which just seems like that in itself is just such an absolute load of horseshit that we're in that situation in the property market.
Yeah.
And I get that everyone's kind of got their arm behind their back, but that doesn't really help anyone, does it? In reality. So
they've, councils have been doing that for years and years and years, and giving that advice to tenants, because they don't want to do anything until there is a desperate situation and all other avenues are being explored, until they have to actually do something themselves.
Yeah. They're kicking the can down the road, aren't they?
Yeah. I spoke to the ALA president yesterday on another podcast that we were doing, and she actually said to me that the first thing she's done is she's written to her local MP. She actually had a Zoom call with her local MP to talk about housing for her particular council area, and she was just sort of mind blown on the lack of knowledge that they had around housing. But she advised all estate agents to do something similar. If you own the business, lettings directors, to send a letter to your local MP, the new one that's got in, and have a chat with them about what their plans are over the next sort of 2 years for housing, and discuss these types of things. And I think it's something that we quite clearly need to do. But that's something which maybe we can do on another podcast, is how we get on with that conversation. So
because your tenant probably doesn't want to go down that route, right?
No, of course not. No,
of course not. But now, because that he's been told that, he's going to be in a situation where, if he hasn't got anywhere else to go, then of course he's just going to stay on the property now, because that's the advice, that's the seed that's been planted in his head now by a local council. It's just ridiculous. And now that puts you in an awkward situation.
Yeah, it puts me in an awkward situation, and I need the property back. I can probably give him an extra month. I'll call him back today and probably give him an extra month to try and make sure that, there's a bit of rationale from all of us there. But at the same time,
it's personal reasons why you need that property back as well.
I need it back for family. So it's not like I'm trying to move him out and put the rent up 200 quid. It's nothing to do with that at all. There's actually a family member that is equally homeless that needs the property. So you got to do what you got to do. And I guess in sort of a segue to that, my tip for landlords is financial planning. I think a lot of landlords, when they look to I call them property investors. A lot of property investors, when they're looking to get a portfolio or get their first buy-to-let, financial planning is done for the purchase, but it's not necessarily done for the next 3 years, and even thinking exit sometimes as well, and even thinking long-term planning. And I think it's something which often, when I've spoke to landlords over the last sort of 20 odd years of doing this job, that they don't sometimes budget for insurances. They never really have a reserve fund, more often than not. Maintenance, tax, repairs, appliances, that type of financial budgeting, change in interest rates when the market's gone from 1.8% interest rates to 5% interest rates, and then you've got no choice but to add an extra £600 to your mortgage. All of these little contingency plans, I think that's something which is really important. If you were looking to buy a business, you would create a business plan with a financial plan for you can't create a business plan for the next 5 years, but you can financially plan to give you something to sort of railroad towards. And I think that would be my number one tip for any property investor that wants to get into it, is to sit down with someone that can give you that knowledge, that's done it before or helped people before, and really work out a financial plan, not just for the purchase, but for the beginning, the middle and the end, if you like, from a storybook analogy. That would be my number one tip. Positive.
Yeah, totally agree with that, because a lot of landlords don't budget for the big events of changing the heating system or changing the bathroom between tenancies when they're getting no money in for the property. So I totally agree with that there should be a contingency fund building.
What percentage do you think that landlords should keep back from the rent that they receive as that sort of
I always
plan?
work very roughly on landlords receiving sort of 10 months out of 12 as rent, and then the rest goes on that contingency, sort of a month on contingency for stuff, day-to-day stuff, and then a month held back for the once every 10-year replacements. I don't know whether that's it was never done with any particular massive accuracy, but it just meant that a landlord would hold some back or know what to budget for. If they only received £10,000 instead of 12, well, the other £2,000 just lock away. 1,000 of that will be spent this year, and 1,000 will be spent when it adds up to 5,000 on a new bathroom or a new heating system or whatever it might be, because those are all needed. And then you're quite right, the exit is different to how it was a couple of years ago, because the capital gains allowances have been dropped considerably. So people have to think about that now, when they're going to do it, why they're going to do it, etc., because it used to get away with a very small capital gains bill, obviously depending on how much you'd bought and sold for, but you could offset an awful lot more than you can now.
And when it needs to be paid as well has obviously changed massively as well. So I spoke to someone 3 or 4 weeks ago. If they're listening, they'll know who they are. that didn't realise that should have realised that's struggling to find quite a large sum of money quite quickly, because they may have spent it on their new home purchase, their residential, and it might be owed. Checking that financial planning out. I think on where you said about percentage, this goes back to what the goal is, and I think that's probably another one of the points and the tips is what's the long-term strategy. But if most people, I would say, that are looking to buy a buy-to-let at the moment or have a buy-to-let, most people, if they're not doing it to try and become financially free, as some sort of nonsense YouTube video would say, but if most people are doing it with a view of, I've got a full-time job, this is like pension planning, or I'd like to have the mortgage paid off by the time I retire, and then that's going to fund some monthly income, which is normally people have 1 or 2 properties to do that. I think my advice on that would be, set yourself up with your financial plan, think of the long term, have the first year's worth of profit just put to one side. You're probably earning enough money if you're able to do that you don't need that couple of £100 income per month. So get year 1 under the belt, almost separate bank account, and whatever that is your reserve. Do the second year, and then if you want to take the profit from the first year, you can use that with day-to-day life, but you've always got a year's worth of rent profit in reserve at that point, and you can almost like pro rata that. And I know that feels long term to go, right, I'm not taking any money until year 2, But if you are looking at it legitimately long term, then you've always got a year's worth of rent profit sat in there, and that way you're ahead of most people, aren't you? Really.
Goes back to planning it like a business, like you said.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like an end of year dividend.
Very few people take money out of their business in the first year because they have to nurture that business and take the payback later, not immediately. It's not a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah, I would imagine the average person will have 4 or 5 grand at the end of the year that they could potentially take after year 2 then. So it's like every year you've got between, 3, 4 or 5,000 pounds that you can draw down from that business or draw down from that bank account if it's not set up in a limited business. And that's like a nice end of year kind of, Christmas and a little bit more. So then it feels like you've got some momentum and progress with your strategy. What else? What would be the other good tips from you, Andy?
My biggest one for property investors, landlords, is to research the market themselves. The amount of times that I've spoken to clients and I've asked the question, what research have you done? Do you know what your property is worth? Probably about 95% of them come back and say, no, I've done nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read that off the top of my list?
I didn't. Why? Is that what you got?
You looked over and then you said it.
No one can read your writing.
That's very true.
That is just scribbles.
That's very true.
But yeah, so it's get yourself on Rightmove. See what other properties are within a half-mile radius of your property. See what rental prices they're going for. See what condition they're in, and get a basic understanding of what you feel your property is worth. Because when I go and meet clients and I ask the question, have you done your research, and they say no, and I say, property's worth £2,000 a month. And they're like, oh, great. And then I say to them, actually, it's not. I've just sort of demonstrated that I can tell you anything and you don't know exactly what your property's worth. Mm-hmm. And actually, in the end, it was worth about £2,700 a month. But they were happy to accept £2,000. So it's with any type of investment, whether it be property, stock shares or anything else, it's that you need to understand exactly what it's worth and how things work. If you're looking to let your property out and you've got 20 others on the market that are in that half-mile radius and they're all around £2,000 and you think that the value of your property is worth £2,500, well, everyone's going to be attracted to those other properties at 2,000 that are in similar conditions, similar size, and in the same areas. So you've just got to make sure that you get it right and just don't rely on an agent telling you what it's worth. We see it in sales all the time, don't we? Your property's worth 800,000 when actually it's worth 650.
Yeah.
And that's just to get it on and price reduce it after that. But there is no point doing that whatsoever, is there? It's just get it right from the start. Do your own research, see what the agent has then got to say, so you've got some comeback to what he gives you. Hopefully that agent's got the same figure as you and demonstrated to you comparables that are on the market or comparables that have previously let, and then you're both on the same page then, and then there's no nasty surprises. So yeah, get your own research done.
Would you say, Mike, as someone that's looking at lettings markets and sales markets, that the rental market is more price sensitive than the sales market? Because from a tenant's point of view, slightly less emotional.
It's definitely less emotional because people will generally be looking for 2 weeks tops and then out of the market again. You go in, you find, you leave, rather than spend months or even years kind of trawling Rightmove, like it's your addiction, taken over from smoking. I think it's one of the UK's biggest addictions, isn't it? Is scrolling Rightmove. Is it more price sensitive? I don't know. I think if you overprice a house for sale, it doesn't go. If you overprice a house for let, it doesn't go. You bring it down into the right bracket and you get the same reaction. The problem with the rental market, as you highlighted, is there's just a massive supply crisis. So in some cases, either tenants push the price up because they're so desperate to find something. You need to be in 2 weeks' time. You've got a family to look after. You will overpay.
Yeah.
It just is the way it is, unfortunately. And it's the solution to that is years away.
Yeah.
There's just no way that can be changed
I
in
think
the
the
short
price
term.
thing we've saw recently, haven't we, with a property that we had in Chinfield, 2-bed and a terrace property, £1,700 a month.
Yeah.
That's for a two bed. So it's just, but those people, they wanted a property like that because you don't get many of those properties come on the market. So as soon as they do, it just hikes the price up because you've got all of that competition there. If a property has been on the market and it doesn't rent out within a week, or you haven't got any inquiries within a week, you drop the price straight away because it's crazy times in the rentals market and we've got a tenant crisis. If there are no tenants coming for that property, then there's an issue with it.
And you're wrong.
Yeah, then we're wrong. As in, for sales, I suppose you could leave it on the market for 3-4 weeks at that price and then look to reduce it at that point. So with the letting side, it's just quick fire.
Yeah, if you haven't got a load of action week one on your rental property when you've launched it and you haven't got, a load of viewings or a tenant, nothing's changing week two.
No, exactly.
So it's like you're 5 days in, you know the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
It just is, that's what it is, which is quite interesting. With trends, talking market conditions and trends, what's our thoughts on that? As Mike just raises a point, nothing's happening in the near future on that. And I was quickly thinking, right, well, you've got build to rents happening, 1 and 2 bed flats, in a lot of the cities, which on a recent webinar that you did, one of the points that you mentioned was that 2 and 3 bedroom houses are the most in demand for tenants. I do feel like we're going to see, maybe not enough, but still in the cities with these build to rents and with these big units, we're going to see 1 and 2 bed apartments become probably the mean, if you like. They will become the most available properties. But if you've got a 2 bed house or a small 3 bed semi or something like that, there's just no way that there's going to be loads of those popping up anytime soon, because builders aren't building many 2 bed houses because it's not cost effective for the developer. They'd much rather have a small 3 bedroom townhouse and throw a bedroom in the loft for it because of the footprint's better. So if you own like a 2 bed end terrace or a 3 bed end terrace or semi, there's not many of those being built. The build to rents are obviously not those. So it feels like that potentially would be, if you're looking at foresight and trend, that could be quite a good place to put your money at the moment, I would potentially think.
Yeah, like you say, because they become more and more of a commodity. It's like buying a house that's closest to town, because no more houses are going to get built closer to the town than that house is. So it becomes more and more of a commodity over time. There are big developers who are building build to rent freehold houses. I would
at a premium though, isn't it?
Purely for investment purposes and at a massive premium. Yeah. But they're built so slowly now. It's not as if that's going to change a market. You're not going to see 500 pop up in a town and solve the supply crisis of that town. And even if that town is solved, well, Britain's quite a big place. There's a lot of towns that need the same solution, because those houses are going to get filled super quick, and then you're back to square one again. You just don't have the ready supply of increased numbers of housing.
The thing with build to rents though, so obviously there are a lot more build to rent developments going up, but like we said, that they come at a premium, right?
Yeah.
So is build to rent actually going to solve anything?
No, because big companies are here to make profits, not to supply housing for the people who really need it. Why would they, when they can supply housing to people who've got loads of money?
Yeah, they've got their clients that they have to satisfy. They've got
their shareholders
proper
to satisfy,
financial strategy. They've got real financial planning that is not, let's go in and try and help this town. That's absolutely not the goal.
No. Yeah. Let's go in and make as much profit as we possibly can.
Yeah.
I would suggest. Build a nice development. And remember, they're building 100 flats or 50 houses or whatever to hold in a portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's for future sale or investment or leveraging value.
I think if you've got a long-term strategy and you're kind of thinking, right, I'm 40 years old and I'm looking to buy this buy-to-let that when I'm 65, Maybe I'll get 2 in that window, and that's going to be my sort of pension planning, etc. I want it paid off in that 25-year window, so I've got all that equity, and then I can get £4,000 a month, £3,500 a month rent out of it. It's quite a common, sensible idea for people that have got the affordability to do it. If you're looking at some of these towns now, and you can find that bungalow that's a mile radius of the village high street or the town centre, that's the absolute gold dust for that. It's the absolute gold dust. I see them when I'm pottering around or running around or whatever it may be, and I just think, if I owned that bungalow that's like a 5-minute walk from the village high street or the local co-op or whatever it may be, that can't lose. That they're the golden ticket long term. Obviously, you pay a premium for a bungalow. The reason you pay a premium for the bungalow is that bungalow will increase in value at a higher rate than all of the other houses in the street that are just standard 3 and 4 bedroom detached, because they're coming more and more rare. Because one thing you will not see on a build to rent or a build to sell is a lot of bungalows popping up, because they're just not cost effective for the developer. So the percentage of bungalows available every year decreases in volume versus the rest. So that would be a great little tip as well. Boys, another little fire tip each before we wrap up.
Little tip from me is don't rush, be patient. And the reason why I say that is because with all of the stuff that's happening at the moment, or did happen with the government, we saw a lot of landlords jump ship and sell their portfolios or their properties. And I think the reason for that is because they got scared of what's to come, which I totally understand. But right now, there isn't anything that's there. And there's no deadlines. There's nothing that's being properly talked about. There's nothing set in stone. Everything's got to, go through Parliament, etc., etc. So right now, it's carry on as normal. Rental prices are doing great. We're still at sort of 7% inflation rates. I think it's around 8.5% in the southeast. Still massive demand for it. Hopefully we'll see, the sales market sort of get better, and you get that capital appreciation better on the property. And I just think that if you're an investor and a property investor, is just to be patient. You would do it with stocks and shares or cryptocurrency or anything like that. You have to be patient. Don't jump too early, because if you be patient, then hopefully you'll see the benefit later on. And the people that I'm talking about are people that didn't need to sell their property.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that some people needed to sell because financial difficulties or other things. But the people that don't need to do it, it's just hold on, speak to the right people, get the right info, and then just see what happens at that point. And just don't get scared by what you see out there in the media or anything like that. Speak to the proper people and then decide on your investment after you have done that and not before.
Yeah, property is one of the least liquid investments you can make. So if you're going to do it, you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's not as if you can trying to buy a house and then dip out again 2 years later will cause headaches.
Yeah.
Unless you're buying it so far under market value, or you can improve the value of that house so much. It's very, very difficult to do. Mine was quite a small tip actually, and it goes back on your financial tips of planning and making it a business, is just open a separate bank account for your property. And then you'll know how you're getting on. Because I'd hazard a guess that 90% of landlords, their rent goes into their current account.
Well, we see it, don't we? When we
well, that's it. Yeah, and so okay, you can gather how much rent you've received, but you wouldn't know what the net amount is that you've received, how much you've spent, how much is building up, how much of the tax that you've paid on it is paid by the property. If it's just a separate bank account where only the income and outgoings for your property go in and out of, you'll have a much better understanding. Even if you're financially illiterate, you'll have a much better understanding. If you started with zero at the start of year one and you ended with £2,500 after you paid your tax bill, well, that's what you made.
Yeah.
Totally fair. Yeah, totally fair. And it's very simple then, very easy to work out. Sits in line with your financial planning. You know where you stand,
It'll
don't
give
you, basically?
give you a boot to review what's happening if the bank account is at zero and stays at zero or goes into its overdraft.
Yeah.
I'll share a little story that someone told me this week, actually, that as an analogy for your property, it'll probably hit quite hard, to be fair. So the guy that I was talking to is a massive koi carp fan.
Right.
Keeps koi carp. Bear with me. Bear with me on this. But he's a huge koi carp fan. Very wealthy man, very successful, and was obsessed with how to get the vibrant colours out of the koi carp. That's when you know you've got that kind of ultimate valuable, because they're super valuable koi carp, really expensive. But to make them worth their ultimate, you have to bring the vibrant colours out. So he went to the level of flying to Japan to talk to this koi carp expert about how to basically get their koi carp to be the best value they possibly could, the most flourishing koi carp they possibly could. And the simple takeaway from flying all the way to Japan, which he probably could have phoned him and got the answer
Yeah, I was going to say,
could have
done
a
Teams
Zoom
is
on
there.
but it was whole part of his thing to go and experience.
Tax deductible.
And what the guy said was, to look after the koi carp, you simply look after the water. That's all you've got to do, is treat the water, make sure the water is nutritious, make sure it's the optimum level. And by treating the water, the koi carp will flourish. So in a roundabout kind of analogy for your property, if you put your property as the koi carp, you want it to be as valuable as possible. You want it to cash flow the best way it can. You want it to be looked after, well maintained. Then look at the environment around it. And that is the tenant, the referencing, the insurances, the letting agent, your estate planning that goes into it, how much care and attention you put into it annually. We haven't even mentioned midterm inspections at this stage, you know, as kind of popping in to check that everything as is, the communication and the relationship that you've got with the tenant. You know, how often are you speaking to them and checking them okay? We had Pete from HMO, and he was talking about, right, every anniversary they get a little bottle of Prosecco or something for another year in their properties. But all of those little things, if you look after the environment around the property itself, it will make you more money, cost you less money, and it will look after the financial planning and the goals that you've got. So that little analogy, I thought you can pretty much apply that to anything in life, right? Whether it's looking after your kid, whether it's looking after your business. But in this Investors Corner podcast, I've used it on every podcast I've done this week.
I like it.
And I had to get it into this one. But
It's the analogy you never knew you needed, but you got it today. So if you want more of Ian's Japanese wisdom, click on the subscribe button and we'll see if we can improve it for next week.
I've got loads. Chat GDP is helping me out all the time. We'll see you next week.